How to solve problems like an engineer and learn. Step one, we're going to have this issue we're dealing with and we don't understand it, and that's all we know right now. The first thing you need to do to address this, and where I tell everyone when I was a TA, is come back to me with what you do not understand. And kids would be like, well, I don't understand the homework. I'm like, no, no. What about this do you not understand? I'd make them go through it and write down a list of, I understand this, but I don't understand how to do this. Because it's very simple. Once you know what you do not understand, I don't understand how to lift. I don't understand proper squatting technique. I don't understand how to access a web camera from Python. Like, whatever it is, that is now a Google question. How to squat properly. How to do keto. Like, instead, you're taking these big questions you might have, and you're going to break them into some smaller ones. And each of those, you're going to realize when you do this, can be Googled. And for some reason, the human brain, we get this thing in our head, and we're like, we come to something and we see it, and we're like, well, I don't understand how to do it. And sometimes, for a lot of people, the lack of a framework to know how to solve something keeps them in that state. And they just stay there like, I don't even know where I'd start. Like, what is this? And as I said, you have to think individually, go through it step by step. Like, you know, like, I don't know how to cook. Okay. Well, you know how to warm up a pan. You know how to, maybe you don't know how to crack an egg. Maybe you look up how to crack an egg. Maybe you look up how long should an egg cook for. Maybe you look up how do I combine spices properly. And you look at all these individual questions because you need to think, okay, I know how to make mac and cheese, which means you know how to heat up things in a pan. You know how to stir things. You know basic combinations of food, like carbs and fat taste good together, but you might have a whole other areas that you're just completely ignorant of. And that's a good thing, because that we're always going to have areas that we don't know. We always have things that we need to learn. But if you go at it with the proper framework, then you can learn them. You can break apart these big ideas. For me personally, I started a co-op and I did not know how to use Python. I didn't know how to, the whole co-op was like programming a spot robot and a robotic arm to have camera recognition through Python. I didn't know how to do any of that. I might have talked a big game in the interview room, but I was lost. What did I do? I'm like, okay, well, I know basic Python. Like, I know how to say x equals 5. Some people don't follow this because it's coding, but I'm like, okay. Next step. How do I access my webcam in Python? How do I run Python on my computer? I Google that, I get an answer. It says PyCharm, which is an integrated development environment that you can run Python in. And I kind of go through step by step. I'm like, okay, how do I get it to recognize objects? And then within recognizing objects, it's how do I, like, you get a list. You can either use a pre-built library or you can build your own. Like, how do I build my own library? And you do this. Pencil and paper helps a lot. But the engineering steps are write down all the knowns, write down the goal, and then write down all the unknowns. And then you're going to use the knowns and you're going to either be able to solve for the unknowns or you realize that there actually aren't any unknowns and you know all the individual components, but you were just a little bit confused before you put it this way about how to break down the problem. This is an absolutely great mindset to have, a great way to solve problems, and I've taught it to many of my friends. And it's a very, once you realize it, it's a very simple thing. It's like, oh, what don't I know? And I can Google that. But when you're stressed out, when you have a lot on your plate, you can't necessarily take the steps to think logically like that. You can't be like, oh, well, I had this big thing that's kind of stressing me out because I had a project due, or maybe I'm a little overweight and I want to work out, but I don't know how to work out. Okay. You can always try Googling how to work out, but you're going to get overloaded with information. So I would ask you, what don't you understand? Maybe you're like, well, I've heard about calories, but I don't know what they are. Maybe I heard running is good, but I don't know the proper techniques in order to do it without injuring myself. Maybe you're like, well, I know people say that stretching is also helpful, but I don't know how to stretch. Each of those individual things you can look up versus if you try just Googling how to work out. Granted, today there's a lot of information. You might find something summarizing all these topics, but a lot of the time it can overwhelm you with the amount of information given. And even if you look up a general guide on how to work out, you're going to have individual parts of that you don't understand. You might not understand proper hydration with electrolytes. You might not understand certain food combinations that might cause you to gain weight, like eating a lot of carbs and fats in the same meal. And there's a lot of stuff to it, and this is really helpful. So go and try this out.